Hey, perfect.
All right.
I am for you.
Cheers, buddy.
All right, it's 2:00, so I'm gonna go ahead and get our meeting started for Parks and Recreation and Reviews Committee meeting. Today's the 13th at 2:00. All right, if we could have roll call, please.
Directors Spardonish
Here.
and Peterson.
Here. Great. All right, so our first item is alternatives to IW and then discussion.
Sure, let me kind of kick this off. When you met, I believe it was in late August. We had discussed, at that time that the board, prior to July, had asked the committee to examine alternatives to remaining with IWMA. And in late August, we reported to you that the county was not a viable option at the time, and as far as I know, remain not so. And maybe more to that story, as we get into some of the other issues with IWA. We were unable to, there aren't any other special district jurisdictions that are likely to remove themselves from IWA and form a new joint effort. So but we did tell you at the time and still believe that Mid-State or North County Recycling could do and is willing to do some of the duties that are presently done by IWA, or maybe I'll revisit most of the duties. And at the time, we had just had sort of preliminary conversation about how much that would cost, and it looked like it was, you know, in the same ballpark as what we are currently paying IWA, the 5.4% hauler fee, which in our case is like $105,000 a year. So there, it's going to go up a little bit, and you know that's kind of, or that it's expected to if the rates continue to climb and the hauler fee remains the same. And I guess more on that in a minute too. So one of the where we left this was, you said, well, okay, let's take like 90 days and figure out, what can we learn about this and then come back. And so really we're here on that topic now. And what I wanted to kind of start with was at least 1383 and which is the most comprehensive of the regulations that we're working with now, but is in addition to former regulations, has some limitations on what a local entity, a local agency, that's what we are, TCSD, can pass along to a private entity like Mid-State or North County Recycling. So what I wanted David Hirsch to address is, what are those limitations? Because if we remove ourselves from IWMA and pursue a path with Mid-State or North County Recycling, there will be some items that don't go along with that, because the law prevents you from doing so. So, and we did a cursory review maybe 6 weeks ago or something. David and I had a conversation about this, and I just asked that he kind of share those today. So, yeah, and you're looking clear now, David. You washed off the camera or whatever.
Yeah, it doesn't look too bad now. Yeah, when Jeff and I talked about this a few weeks ago, I took a little time and went through the Cal Recycle regulations, just to kind of refamiliarize myself with what all this entailed and what those regulations said, specifically as it related to delegation, which of course we have at this point delegated to IWMA. And while there are really only a couple of areas where there's a prohibition on delegation, one of which is determining waivers, which you can have commercial waivers and a few other things like that, de minimis waivers, and also the issue of penalties can't be delegated. But there are a whole slew of different requirements that require extensive record keeping and reporting that I just don't see how a small entity like Templeton really has the staffing or capacity to deal with. And the other problem, in my view, with all due respect to Mid-State and their good intentions, there's some things that we need to monitor what the hauler is doing, and just putting the hauler in charge of those things doesn't seem completely appropriate. The other problem is that regardless of the delegation, the agency is, the district is ultimately responsible for complying with all of these different requirements, and there are quite a number of different requirements, from education requirements to inspections to monitoring, and again, lots of reporting to the Cal Recycle folks. I actually found it very interesting what Jeff included in the agenda packet, because IWMA is, I guess, had commissioned a study from HF&H, the consultant that helped us to implement SB 1383. All of the agencies in the county were getting the assistance through IWMA of HF&H. And now they have been tasked, based on this report, with analyzing IWMA and its functions and how they can cut costs. And I thought it was really interesting. I wasn't aware of this until I saw it in the agenda packet, but one of the items in there is leverage member agencies and franchisees, haulers, to reduce costs. So I think we're going to be seeing more information as IWMA moves forward with looking at this report. I'm not exactly sure what the status is. Jeff, perhaps you know, but this was in November, so not that long ago. And I would expect we're going to see what this means in terms of leveraging the member agencies and also the haulers when it comes to implementation of all these requirements. And I guess there's also, on a statewide level, things going on in that article that was shared as well, where there is looking at kind of what the state has wrought when it comes to SB 1383, because they've created a statewide program that I'm sure is causing issues not just for Templeton, but every entity in the state that provides refuse collection. So those are some of my thoughts. The other thing that was interesting is their analysis included potentially reducing that 5.4% fee to the 4.1 to 4.4% range. So Jeff, I don't know if you've been at following any meetings and have more to add in terms of that effort, but I know
I can address that. I've had a number of conversations with IWA and followed along with some of their meetings regarding the hauler fee. So what I think what I wanted to cover first is really like, okay, conceptually, we can pass along many of the responsibilities to Mid-State Solid Waste through a separate, likely a separate agreement. Conceptually, the cost is on par for those duties with what we're paying IWMA now. Keep in mind, we would have to maintain some duties which we've presently passed along to IWMA that we couldn't pass along to Mid-State. I think looking at this, I guess conceptually speaking, Mid-State has said, okay, look, we think we can probably agree to do that. We haven't drafted any language or anything because it's just, we don't know if there's even an interest in pursuing this. We'd have to draft a new agreement. What Mid-State suggests is maybe we could live with those kind of costs for 2 years. And then after 2 years, we would kind of audit our expenses and then come back to the district with, if it costs more, we'd have to charge the district more after that 2-year period. At the same time, now that we're, with IWMA, it was somewhat surprising that HF&H came out with this analysis back in October, and then it was presented to the executive committee at IWMA in late October, and then at their board meeting in November. And really, what HF&H's analysis showed is through the implementation of some common best practices, like not producing their own educational materials, but using some sort of a standardized educational materials, streamlining their budgeting. They had budgeted for, they had kind of rushed to get the budget together. Remember, IWMA's been in a kind of a upheaval for a couple of years now. When they put the budget together, they budgeted costs in multiple areas, so they were really sort of overstating their expenses. You know, likely unintentionally, but overstating their projected expenses, that sort of thing. So HF&H believes, and it was shared with the board, that if the current level of effort is sustained, that the hauler fee should go down by, down to about 4.1 to 4.4%. Now, in talking to Peter Crone at IWMA, he thinks that this will be realized effective July 1st with the new budget. And that the rates could come down even further, particularly if the county rejoins IWMA. And there's, reason to believe that that will be the case. The county majority, the county leaving IWMA was a political decision. And the political majority has likely just changed. And obviously we don't know what's going to happen, but I would not be surprised if there was an effort to rejoin IWMA. The county left IWMA, but they didn't really leave it. They're still have an agreement with IWMA to perform certain services. So if the county were to re-enter it, the estimate is that the rates would go down by about a third. So that's kind of where we land, where we stand on this. I think, or what we know. I think the committee needs to, help with staff, help discuss with staff is if the goal is to provide these services at a cost lower than IWMA. I don't think Mid-State is I don't know that that's something that we can promise through Mid-State Solid Waste. Is that fair, Ron?
Yes, as we talked.
Yeah.
It becomes more challenging at that volume, at that level, and again, the bigger concerns are it's probably pretty easy to give notice and leave. It's that re-entry that may be concerning as far as if that ever happens. So how long can we talk about the possibility of it for being outside the IWMA structure? I mean, so yeah, I think there's interest. Brad's never been a big fan of the IWMA, the owner of Mid-State Solid Waste, and I try to be more rational with it, with David's approach to it, as far as maybe self-policing and being able to have the ability to say, yes, we could do that, but then we need to do that. Economy of scale still concerns us quite a bit. E-waste and household hazardous waste is done by subcontractors that would do it for us in Templeton as quickly as they do for IWMA and any other association across the state. Corporate e-waste is the one company that does the electronic waste, and then household hazardous waste is done by Stericycle. There's a fixed fee for them to come and represent themselves for a Saturday drop-off station at, let's say, Mid-State Solid Waste or Chicago Grade, and then of course volume dictates the rest of that bill. E-waste, if it's done and there's plenty of volume and there's a lot of rebate and credit for that volume, then sometimes, like here's a bill from 2 months ago, it was $2.58. They got so much volume into their e-waste drop-off that it really negated and reduced the fixed fee that they represent to hold the actual drop-off center. Stericycle, for the most part, is volume goes in a different direction. The more volume, it's a $45,000 bill versus a $28,000 bill. My concerns with Templeton is that we do it just for, the population of Templeton as a CSD. Those could play different places and what our estimates are as far as what that may or may not cost us.
Yeah, IWMA doesn't. So one, right now, because all of the jurisdictions within the county participate in these programs, the ones Ron just went over, in a collective way, they're not tracked by jurisdiction. So like if you go to Chicago Grade and drop off your half a gallon of paint or a burnt up television, you're probably not being asked where you live. It's just charged to the greater IWMA.
When the reporting entity is the county.
Right.
Basically.
In the county, anywhere in the county. When the county pulled out of IWMA, they went back with a contract with IWMA and said, please keep running all these programs because it doesn't make sense for us to run them. We don't know whether IWMA would be receptive to that kind of an agreement with Templeton.
Right.
More than likely not, but I don't know. I don't know. And so what we don't have a good sense of really is just how much Templeton business is making its way to those various drop-off points. And if we were to pull out how, and you showed up at Chicago Grade, how would it be dealt with by the IWA subcontractor? And where would you be redirected to? You'd be redirected obviously to our own services with likely at Midstate, and we have advantage of having a physical location here. But we don't know, then how would we deal with someone from Paso Robles coming to Midstate? Same issue, right? I mean,
Sure.
so it's all of a sudden, we have to compartmentalize that. So there's some uncertainty there. But I think we can work through those issues if the committee still wanted to push forward with this concept and the board remained receptive. But I think what we know now is that the maybe best case scenario, it's on par with what IWMA charges. If IWMA costs go down by 20 to 35%, which is kind of the current estimate range, and our costs stay higher, all of a sudden we're in it, our customers or the district, one way or the other, is going to end up paying that $25,000 to $35,000 more a year. And that's in the short term. If 2, 3, 5 years from now, the arrangement with Midstate ends up costing more. Let's say the estimates are not strong and the $105,000 becomes $150,000 or $200,000, then we've got a bigger challenge. And the challenge, of course, as Ron mentioned, is okay. Let's say that we do this for 3 or 4 years and decide that it hasn't been, it's not the best long-term solution. Then we have to go beg to get back in IW land. There's no, we don't know. We can't control whether or not they'll let us back in. So there's risks associated with pursuing the path. So I think that's kind of where we are today. The board asked the committee to kind of research this. We're providing information to you. I think we can keep researching other options, although there aren't not very many appear to be available. Or we can report back to the board that we've researched it and it's available, but there's various risks, and there's one of those risks it could cost quite a bit more in the long run.
Thank you. Well, thank you for your report. Appreciate it. It's very eye-opening. Thank you. Any questions, comments?
Yeah, I guess my comment would be, I guess I've sort of changed my mind since the board made the vote. I think a lot of the directors at the time, and I still believe, that we've got a gun to our head as far as the IWMA is concerned. But having said that, I think the feeling then was that at some point you have to make a stand. And I kind of believed that at the time, but now I'm thinking that, to make a stand is going to be hurtful to the district. And I don't think we need to do that at this point in time. I mean, it sounds to me like there's still way too many unknowns. I'm still of the opinion that Midstate really doesn't want to do this. They're going to do it because we're asking them to do it. I heard, which I didn't like a little earlier, it's going to take a lot of staff time to do these reports. I don't think we have the staff really to do that, unless Carrie wants to work overtime for free. And again, there's just way too many unknowns. I mean, the first time ever, I think I've heard, well, not the first time I've heard government saying they're going to cut costs. I don't think I've ever seen it yet. So when I hear that they're going to cut the costs and our rates are going to go down, I don't know. I'm kind of leery about that.
Yeah,
But
I
anyway.
am too, and I share your view on that. I just do want to point out that I think that this thing was rushed a year ago when IWMA. A lot of this is due to the real turmoil that IWMA was in for a couple-year period. And they had originally proposed to increase the hauler rate had gone up. And then they came back and almost immediately, before it even took effect, came back immediately and said, now that the county's pulling out, we need to re-examine that. And their cost estimates just skyrocketed this 5.4%. Most of us were really kind of befuddled. So I think the fact is that they now are stabilizing. they've got permanent staff and have realized that, okay, maybe we were too, you know, maybe we just messed up here. But I tend to agree with you that we hear all the time, or, you know, I should say all the time, but you know, that, okay, you know, it's, you don't, you know, you do the Prop 218 notice. And then when the rates go down, it just, everyone saves money, you know, but that doesn't happen very often.
Just
Anyway,
to add to
sorry.
that, just to add to that briefly, I also am aware, because our firm represents other agencies in the county that have a refuse collection and had to comply with SB 1383 and also deal with the issues of the revisions to the IWMA Joint Powers Agreement. And I know that the cities, several of the cities, when they adopted resolutions indicating their continued involvement with IWMA, had a number of stipulations that were included. And I think that report from HF&H that we're seeing is the fruition of some of that, because of the concerns that agencies throughout the county, not just Templeton, had with IWMA and how it was functioning.
So anyway, I think it's probably a benefit to us by staying with IWMA. Even though I don't like the fact that we're being forced to do this, but I don't think this is the right time to stand on principles or whatever you want to call it. So I would be against going the route that we've been going. So I say we should stay with IWMA.
Yeah, I mean, as far as for me, there were two big concerns that I had staying with IWMA. One was the cost, and second was basically if our voice is going to be heard at IWMA. So as far as the cost, that was actually, the cost was secondary. So I was even willing to consider a little bit higher cost if our voice was going to be heard a little bit better. But my concern is that I don't think I don't know if, MedState is going to be able to provide the service that we need without adding quite a bit of hours to your, to our staff time. So that's going to be, that's going to be a big challenge. The second thing is as far as our voice being heard, I think it's big news that the county may join IWMA. I mean, I think if the county joins it, then we're going to get a little bit more balance there. So, so because of that, if the county ends up joining and hopefully the costs go down, I think we'd be in better situation staying with IWMA. So I definitely, at this point, I think based on the information that we have, we should wait and wait and just see what happens over the probably. I'm assuming within a year or so, we know if the county has joined and.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably right. If there's gonna be a rejoining of IWMA, it makes sense that the county would consider it early, not 5 or 10 years from now. That's just my take on it.
Okay. Yeah.
The only thing that I would say is I would vote against this until we knew if we were going to go on our own. I'd have to have assurances that we could get back in. That bothers me too. Really bothers me, because then we'd really be out in the middle of the ocean without a boat.
Yeah, and that's gonna be.
And that's gonna be hard to get, right? Because really, remember, if we left, it would, and there's a way out, 6 months notice, there's a way out, there's an off ramp, right? That was built into the agreement. The way to get back in is by the IWMA voting to re-accept us. And even those votes are going to change over time, right? The members of the IWMA board are going to change over time. So now, I mean, I guess you'll get a sense of how receptive, how easy do they make it for the county to rejoin, if in fact that does come up.
Yeah, my guess is, as of now, unless they do this revote, they find 14 votes. You're right, the county will go back.
Okay. All right, so I mean, I think both of us agreed to just hold off them for now and just stay with IWMA, and so we could report back to the board saying that we have discussed everything, we looked at options, and for now, the committee at least believes that it's best option to stay with it.
Okay, so that'll be reflected in these meeting minutes, and when these meeting minutes are go before the board, then maybe one of you could speak up about that topic and just to, you know,
Okay.
to just so the other board members are aware of the committee's recommendation at this time, and you know, yeah, staying with that, it doesn't require any action. Because we're in, you know, until we're not. I did want to, since we do have David on the call here, just to clarify, if the IWMA lowers their fee, we complied with Prop 218 and did a notice, included the 5.4% IWMA fee as part of the fees. If that fee gets reduced, we can just approve a lower fee without noticing folks.
Yes,
Yeah,
th- that's correct.
yeah.
Yeah, Prop 218 relates to increases, not.
So, you know, like I said, the timing is probably not gonna ever work out perfectly because the way our fees, you know, the way our fee structure works with mid-state or the rates. Mid-state's gonna notify us probably in, you know, January, February, requesting an April 1 COLA, because they're entitled to that. It will be significant, right? Because the 20, we've had high inflation in 2022 again. So, you know, I don't know, but let's say 7% or somewhere somewhere in that vicinity. Then if this, those fees would, that's administratively approved because the notice already included that anticipated COLA or notification of it. Then if these rates go down for this reason, for IWMA's reason, it would go down, you know, I'm just throwing this out there like 1.5% or something. So it won't offset the COLA. But it would still be less, and mid-state's rates are structured so that they have a base rate plus a franchise fee plus the IWMA fee. Should be able to, if the fee does go down, that's something we could work out.
Sure, and if the timing's right, April certainly could be in play. But I think it sounded like that, it was leaning toward June of next year. On the calendar of the fiscal year. For the
Yeah, I think what Peter indicated to me was that really it would be part of their next year.
We may be off one billing cycle since we bill 2 months at a time.
Right.
Certainly that would all be.
So, okay.
One other question, I would like it in the minutes. David, if I understood you correctly, I would have to say that you were really not in favor of us doing this. Is that correct?
I guess it's not so much being in favor, it's really a board decision. It's just, I have difficulty seeing how a small agency would have the in-house expertise to be able to provide the oversight that really would be necessary, since ultimately the district is responsible for complying with all of these calorie cycle requirements. And you know, IWMA obviously does have more of that capacity, and in this report that it even talks about providing more training in doing more things in-house. But these are complicated laws and rules and regulations, and it requires someone, you know, if the district were to do it, to have a considerable knowledge of what the requirements are, even if Midstate is providing a lot of those functions, since there needs to be some level of oversight with regard to making sure that all of those requirements are being complied with, so you don't run afoul of calorie cycle and their ability to impose fines and penalties and so on.
But I would like to somehow put it in minutes. I mean, my terminology, legally, we can do it, but he's really, I don't know what the word is. I'm not an attorney, so I don't know all those words. But anyway, thank you, David. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right.
Jeff, in looking at the rest of the agenda, I guess you don't really need me anymore?
I think that's about it. Everything else, I think it's more conversation. We're good. So appreciate it. Glad you got your camera working.
Yep. By the way, take a look at my emails about codifying the fire code stuff.
Yeah,
and-
I just saw it. It needs to blend with the new code, the new enumeration.
Right, so then I'm gonna be revising things accordingly.
And we sent you another an updated version of that this
Yes.
afternoon. There was some sections missing.
Right.
Perfect.
Let,
Thank you.
let me know what the timing is, because this may take a little while on my part.
Oh, we're hoping to get it on our next, on our board meeting agenda for next week. So, you know, a couple of days. Is that doable?
Yeah, it should be. I think I mentioned in my email, if you don't mind my talking about this just for a moment. My email, I've done a lot of these building code and fire code things, and I always look at the codes too. Even though the building officials or fire chiefs do a very capable job, and I don't step on their toes in terms of content, but usually it's just formatting and numbering and making sure the sections say what they say they're amending. So that'll take a little bit of time, and I'll try to get it done in the next couple of days.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Have a good day. All right. So you guys have enough direction? We're good? Move on to the next. Okay, all right. Thank you. All right, so next item is the implementation of SB 1383. So.
You know,
good stuff.
Yeah, I just wanted to share, especially with Ron here, just kind of what we've ran into over the, at least from my point of view, what we've ran into over the last few months. You know, the board approved new rates that took effect on July 1st. You approved them in June, took effect July 1st. For the most part, those rates they went up for a number of reasons, right? Some of them due to the way we allocated those costs. The most significant rate adjustment was for commercial organic recycling when folks used a cart. Okay. And I say that because we had decided about 5 or 6 years ago that there were probably going to be some customers who wanted to use organics, who wanted to use cart service as opposed to bin service for recycling. And at the time, Midstate and we agreed that we had an extra cart fee. It was around about $10. Just don't hold me to that number, but it might have been $8.95 or something in that time. About $10. And we said, you know, this is only going to be a handful of these businesses. We have this fee already set up. If someone wants it, we'll just do it that way. Well, that was really under the implementation of 1826, as I recall, where only the largest of the food handlers, restaurants, were required to have organic service. Under 1383, essentially everybody should have organic service unless they are entitled to an exception for a waiver for one reason or another. Okay, so we knew that was going to be somewhat of an issue. Then over the course of the next few months, Midstate, actually in September, Cal Recycle kind of clamped down on IWMA to get Templeton compliant, really with 1826, I think.
Because they couldn't enforce 1383.
1383 is like been delayed a couple of years, but they clamped down on us through IWMA. IWMA gets their contractor, which is, I believe, Discovery Science, Discovery Science, sorry, to start auditing and working with the businesses and working with the customer list from Midstate. We're not really in the middle of this, the TCST staff, until somebody has an issue or whatever. So for the most part, what I've ran into is the people who've called me were people who, as it turns out, were commercial customers. I'm gonna say commercial, meaning non-single family residential for the time being, because we'll get to why. Who were being asked to start paying for a different type of organic service. In some cases, bin service, in other cases, being billed for commercial cart service because they're a commercial entity. And what we've kind of figured out through this process is that there were about a dozen or 10 or a dozen or some fairly small number, a couple of handfuls of businesses who over time going back 30 years, started getting services that were kind of off the books. Someone dropped off an extra green cart, someone dropped off an extra blue cart or a couple blue carts, and they weren't ever part of the rate structure. They weren't being charged for them. And so when we went to rectify that, it skyrocketed their bill. And their bill would have gone up anyway, but none because of all the other changes, but it made it like it more than doubled it in some cases. And so fortunately, I think going back 20, 30 years ago, there's some valid explanations. In other words, we were trying to get everybody's trying to get diversion, right? Trying to keep stuff out of the landfill. 1, 2, if the hauler was picking up green waste 20 years ago, and the only other option was for folks to throw that in the garbage bin. It was costing the hauler more money to process it as garbage because we were paying a tipping fee for it, and essentially getting green waste was pretty neutral 20 years ago, almost cost neutral. Same thing with if it was really clean, if the blue container, let's say it was just cardboard and it was really clean, the business was really clean, that was a moneymaker for the hauler 20 years ago, as opposed to an added cost of something that went to the landfill. So for a variety of reasons, customers ended up with a bunch of additional services without necessarily them falling into one of the specific rate categories or being billed for some of those services. And what I've learned in this process is, one, I think we need to clarify and be more transparent about what's included with the service that someone signs up for. For example, it's not clear when you're a commercial customer if you're entitled to more than one recycling bin, or if you're a commercial cart customer, or for that matter, a residential cart customer, and you need more than one recycling bin, how much does it cost? As we have some commercial customers who are being billed essentially like a residential customer might have 6 or 7 cans instead of 3. And we have then we have a whole other group of customers where there's inconsistency in how their services are being provided. Solid waste services being provided by bin service, recycling is being provided by a bin service, green waste is being provided by cart service, that kind of thing, like a multifamily customer. So I think what Ron and I've kind of talked about, and we can't implement this on the fly necessarily, but I think there's a couple of things we need to do or we should consider doing. Right now, our rate structure has a residential rate, and that is, I'll say it's intended to be single family, but it doesn't have to be. It could certainly be a duplex or something. And that includes whatever size black can someone selects. There are 3 sizes, and then a 65-gallon blue recycling cart and a 95-gallon green waste cart. And in our notes of the rates, it says they can pick a smaller cart for recycling or green waste if they choose to. Some people just don't have the space for that or don't have a need for that, but there won't be a cost savings.
At the same rate as the larger.
And that's worked out okay. That kind of notes worked out okay. But for commercial, it's unclear what services are included. The prices are a little bit different. And it's been maybe in these handful of cases not consistently applied. So what I'm going to recommend we ultimately do in the long run is whenever we get around to renoticing, and the CPI won't trigger that, but if we need to renotice due to Prop 218, we eliminate the reference to residential and commercial for cart service and just call it a curbside cart service. And if the customer, as long as they're willing to haul it to the curb and it can be picked up with the side loader, because in Templeton, all of the routes are really, Midstate can accommodate commercial businesses on a residential route because they're intermixed essentially, or very close to. And we clearly define what's included. And then if the commercial service needs 2 or 3 extra recycling carts, then they get billed for those extra recycling carts, just like a residential customer would. And if they need an extra green waste cart, they get billed for the extra green waste cart. Then separately, if you remember, one of the reasons the commercial green waste cart went up in cost, let's say it went up from that extra $10, it didn't go up. That was just the sort of option, right, that we had previously used to like $60, was because the estimated weight of the cart was determined to be significantly higher. We were picturing most of the customers that would need this service would be customers that were getting trash service by bin in bins or front loader, like a bin service, I'll call bin dumpster service. And that this organic service was a new service because of 1383, and that it would be heavy, wet food waste. That was our estimate. And Midstate provides this kind of service like I think the California Men's Colony. True now, right? In 65 gallon containers because they get too heavy for 95s and so forth and so on. And so I think what I'll recommend is that we evaluate the what's in these containers as we get them placed, because this was sort of theoretical. And because we ran into cases where we have people putting in pretty much the same kind of yard waste we've always used them for, but now being stuck with a much higher bill. They're not heavy, they're not full of food waste that's hard to process or anything. So that being said, organic waste just in general is becoming more expensive to process, right? The contamination of the food waste, the extra processing required for the food waste is going to make organic waste more costly for North County Recycling, North County Compost to collect. So I just wanted to alert you to that. What we've kind of done, and I've kind of worked with Midstate on, is in these handful of cases, we've kind of had to deal with some sort of creative solutions to not really upset the customer, realizing that we collectively have been part of the problem by not charging them historically or providing services at no cost. But I think our canned solution doesn't work for those cases right now. And we need to update the rates at some point. Probably doesn't make sense to do so until there's a new Prop 218 notice, but update the rates to clarify that. The real issue is under Prop 218 compliance, we have to treat all the customers the same. There isn't an option. You can't really have under Prop 218, you can't have customers who get a better deal. It's not a private, it doesn't allow for that kind of overly creative interpretation. So kind of in I think I'll say a temporary situation with these, really just a few that we've.
Half of the 12 you talked about earlier, I think were challenges for us. Thanks to your efforts and your staff efforts, we've erred on the side of doing the right thing for the customer, except for maybe the correction of some of the services that were kind of built up over the years that maybe were given out and not identified as a billable service. Because Brad's opinion was always, I'd rather put it in a green waste container because I can handle that at my own compost facility versus taking it to the landfill and paying for it as disposal at the Chicago Green Landfill. So it was probably the right decision. The complication came, of course, with the splitting of the 1383 regulations and the impact of the commercial side. We were a little heavy on the pounds per yard, as you described. And I think the other part of that might have been, the definitions of what was a commercial versus a multifamily versus a residential curbside, which I think we've worked through and just have to kind of put that into the
I think
rates.
you just have to get that, clarify the rates.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think we're all good. The other part I wanted to mention, again, 1383 and some of the costs that came to the commercial small cart customers is really reporting and policing and some of the things that no one had any sense for what it may or may not be. The dumpster diving to make sure that, the contaminants are at a minimum. And that's not been a big issue for us so far. Now, I was a little surprised. I went through the Thanksgiving week and I saw the collection of the green waste. I watched every green waste container dump from Templeton and the county and didn't see one turkey carcass, which was disappointing to me because I thought I'd see a whole bunch of turkey carcasses, but it wasn't a single one. I go, one in the black container. But mine went in the black green container, but of course it's served by Possible Waste. But so yeah, it might have been a little bit maybe cautious and sensitive to some of the estimates, but I think we've worked through it thanks to your efforts in getting involved with the customers that were sensitive to it. But so it was minimal of the 12, maybe 6. Because maybe a multifamily or a space constraint or a free container issue that built up over the course of the years that really kind of got resolved fairly quickly.
So anyways, we'd like to just alert you to that. that, you know, that I do expect that next time we do a Prop 218 notice, that we'll probably be recommending some clarifications to the services that just to clean things up. And to rectify that, just so we can ensure that all customers are being treated equally. And then really, some of the things that Ron talked about, we really aren't there yet, right? You know, 1380, we are not 100% compliant with 1383, that we were, you know, we're getting services ready for 1383.
Right.
But even IWA still hasn't provided us with the
Education, stickers, labels, labels, that-
This is and really, you probably see that 1383 had some originally some hard deadlines. Those were postponed by a couple of years. But everyone's pretty kind of far behind on it right now. I mean, you know, we're readying for it. But I think I'd say, you know, if we had to do a hard audit or something today, we would be well out of, I mean, the customers would be well out of compliance.
Well, and as to the article that you attached, on the study outside of the agenda, that one section, we're not alone. If you look at scale 2.5 organics diversion target still viable. So self-policing was granted by Cal Recycle until 2024. So we all were aware of that. You know, we are doing the reviews, we are taking pictures and sharing with the customer, saying, hey, this is in the wrong container, but we're not tagging, we're not, you know, policing it to the point where there's gonna be a violation. That's not the goal. The goal is to educate, and then hopefully get ready for 2024. But we're not alone. But I think we have seen some conversation taking places. We talked a little bit about the VFW post and maybe a couple other things, that the music in the park and how we're going to approach that whole thing, and what's going to make the most amount of sense to make sure that the large events are done correctly, the 1383 specs, and then also make sure that if there's anything that's unique, we get aware of it and share with that, and to make sure the education takes place, and then we're responsive to the requirements of the service.
I'm not surprised you didn't see any turkey. I mean, everybody I talk has no clue what to put in what.
Really? Well,
Yeah.
food is food. Throw it in the green waste container. I mean, I take my 2 eggshells out every Sunday morning. Have an egg sandwich Sunday morning before I go to church, and I take my 2 eggshells over to my green container, which is further than any other container I have because the landscapers keep it out back, and it's like I put it in there.
Well,
But
how about if paper goods are got bacon grease on it, goes in the green container?
yeah, as long as it's like a napkin or a paper plate, yes, green waste. Yes, that paper is organic and it's considered organic. So you're spot on, Director Peterson. We have not done a good job. IWA is a little bit behind. Cal Recycle is a little behind. If you read this whole thing, and I get that. And even looking at what they have done correctly, there's still concerns about getting to the targets that they want in 2025. But it's literally going through. If you look at what I generate in my kitchen, and I'm pretty good at it, I keep a pretty good record of it. I take a picture and what have you. I don't generate any food. I generate I throw out a couple of eggshells and maybe some bacon fat or what have you, maybe a chicken wing bone every now and then, but not a lot.
What about a can that's got food in it?
A can?
Yeah.
Well, you should rinse it and throw it in the blue container, because that should go
Now
recycle.
that's where you're gonna have problems.
Yeah.
With the residents
Sure.
having to.
They've been doing that for years.
Some
Aluminum
people-
cans and Pepsi or Coke cans.
My wife gets all over me when she sees me wasting water, rinsing out a can.
It doesn't have to be perfectly clean, but a rinse is always appreciated because of vector control and all the other good things when you go. Someone's got to sort through that by hand on a recycling line. So
Okay, again, but my.
not a
point is-
dishwasher. Don't
Yeah,
put it in
my-
the
my
dishwasher.
point is, I don't think there's anybody out there that really knows. I'm surprised when I heard you say you're taking pictures and talking to people now, because you've never caught me yet.
No, well, I'm not saying we're very good at it, but when we do have an interaction and we see like a whole bunch of green waste in a black container, we address it. Do I look for a chicken wing in a black container, No, we're not doing that as of yet.
Yeah, okay.
That police is gonna be a little different. I think we talked a long time and said, well, if you put everything in a plastic bag and you tie it in a plastic bag and put it in a black container, I'm not going through that bag. So I get that. There's gonna be certainly folks that can have the ability to figure out a way to beat the system or get around it. But it's more about getting out, getting education, getting people in the repertoire of saying, hey, this has got to go into a different location. This is actually food waste. This is, bacon grease on a napkin or a paper plate, which is certainly good.
But not a plastic plate.
No, not plastic. That's not organic. But I just got into a big debate about organic compost with recycled gypsum, which we do on a pretty regular basis because the soil's out in east side of the world love the gypsum, in the soil mix, so we compost it and they end up doing a rebate program and they're knocking the rebate program down from $10 to $5 because it's got 50% gypsum in it. And I said, well, that's gypsum, it's 100% recycled. Why would you not want me to do that? And the Cal Recycle sent me a letter back saying, it's not organic. Gypsum is not an organic material. It's a compound and it's mined and it's not organic, which is mind boggling.
But yeah, so we do need to.
But we're learning.
So we do need to improve the education. I don't know, to set up public workshops.
Well, yeah, so
things like
really,
that.
we're paying IWMA to do that.
Yeah, that's
Like,
what I'm saying.
they're just, it's just a timing issue. I mean, I think they'll eventually come around and do it. I'm very hopeful, but we're all collectively behind. It's not just a
Yeah.
Templeton behind. So I think the consistency of messaging is really gonna be important here. And it's important that, and IWMA spent months going through how the little sticker should look and all this, how to, so multi-languages and all that, and they've approved it all. They just haven't given it to us yet to start applying it on all of our cans and those sorts of things. So yeah, when that rolls out, we'll figure out how to, one, get the board members up to date and what kind of community engagement we need to have, but I think it's a collective issue. Every home, the events are gonna be really tricky. I mean, we're basically not gonna be able to do concerts in the park the way we've done it before. We have to have organic waste at every waste collection location. And most of what's out there is probably in an organic waste. And we're not doing any organic waste collection today.
Yeah, and to your point, I think, and if you look at what you do get out of IWMA, there is a pecking order there. So I think there are going to the SLOs of the world and maybe the large municipalities. And I think they're looking at CDSs as an opportunity to get to at some point, but last mailer we did, which is a mandatory requirement of our contract, and everyone's franchise agreement with IWMA and any of the municipalities, is a February notice, which we missed. Last year we did the notice, but it wasn't really in place quite until the middle of the summer of this past year. So this February, they just talked about on the IWMA meeting last week, it's going to be all about 1383 and diversion organics in the February notices. And they just paid the invoice for the stickers for the containers and the cards. So we're expecting distribution from IWMA probably within the next 2.
And then, I mean, speaking of Constance Park, I think we should use it as an education
We should.
for people, we put the garbage cans out and with the label on it, and maybe that's how we get.
Well, and there's just so many. We talked about the fundraiser for your thing over there, and it was like, oh boy, I was taking me and Director English were cleaning up plates. And I'm like, well, we're just throwing these all in the same container here. And I'm standing there with the director that hires us to do this stuff for them with IWMA. I get all that, but not just in the park.
Yeah.
The parade, the 4th of July parade. I mean, another big event that technically qualifies for a large event, 2,000 people or bigger, is a 1383 event that the reporting's got to be different and the collection's got to be different and the waste characterization's got to be done for those events.
So it's hard. I mean, this is gonna be, this,
We need to.
yeah, I mean, well, and so I think, like, for example, Concerts in the Park's not a good candidate for some of the solutions because it's a bring your own thing. But if that was our event and we controlled everything, you can migrate to like 100% organic cups, plates, all that, and then you would just have the one container. But short of that, it's a mess. And even places that are equipped have the 3 containers. If you go to Costco food court, for example, they'll have all 3 containers, but watch how people use them.
Yeah.
The only places I've seen where I think that things are being handled properly is when the service that's hosting the location processes all the waste. So in other words, when I go to a Vail ski resort and I finish lunch, whether it's outside or inside or whatever, you don't throw anything away. You hand your tray of trash on a counter and there's a person who sorts all that waste.
Oh, I'd want that job.
Nothing, there's no more trash cans.
That's the highest level of diversion and the highest level of success.
Yeah.
The way you just described it, slow, the university down there slows like parents' weekend. We just say, drop it off, leave it, put it on the table, we'll take care of the rest.
There's other people haven't learned how to do the sorting yet.
Rec department can handle that.
Well, I think really like when you
We're gonna
think
need some
about.
volunteers, Wayne, you in?
Yeah, if English can do it,
I
I
mean,
can.
Ron's over here volunteering and I'm doing something.
Sure.
I have a quick question in terms of implementation. At what point is Mystic gonna look and make sure all the residents in Templeton have service?
Well, As far as organics,
As far as any service, yeah, have the garbage service, waste service.
well, it's mandatory. It's in the ordinance, it is mandatory. So I don't know if we
Does
have
that
anything
mean-
missed. For me to say that everyone who's ever moved in, especially like rentals or folks who don't own property, we don't get any kind of change of service or change of ownership property, they could put it in their neighbor's container, and I may never know that, but I mean, I'm assuming they
So, I mean.
take residency and they call us for service.
Yeah, but, are you guys checking, making sure every address in Templeton has a service?
We do it on a periodic basis. Do we ever miss any when someone calls and cancels and never get a startup again? Yeah, but what we try to do there is leave the containers there, so we know that they gotta call back up for service. But there may be someone who doesn't call for service, especially like very, condensed areas where there's multiple homes, or maybe a home in the street, on the street side, and then maybe a home behind it. I think we catch the majority of them, but I'm sure there's some that just say, well, I'm not gonna call, I'm just gonna put my bag in my neighbor's container, or I have the containers already here, so I'm not even gonna bother calling. But we do keep track of a cancellation to make sure there's a recovery call or a new startup call. Yes, we do. Do we catch them all? It's hard to say we catch them all.
Okay.
But we do try, either from water taps or water bills. We do a comparison to what you all bill on your water bills and
Okay.
most of our notifications. We try to do a parallel to that to say, okay, this is what we know went out. Are we on those same customer levels for our routes? But I'm sure there's some that slip by.
Okay.
Disappointing.
If they don't have service, then you go to them and let them know that they need to get a service.
It's a requirement in the franchise ordinance. Well, we do have some people do kickback on, like people want to cancel their service for 6 months when they go somewhere else, then they'll come back and they don't start up again. But we send a bill, basically, we send a bill and start collecting it. Because we go up and down the streets, we pick up everything.
Right.
So I mean, once we know they got the addresses, which again, even if we have a stop service, we don't take the address out of our system. We just stop billing that customer who called and canceled it by their name, but we have the address still in our systems, as hopefully someone's gonna call, either re-rent it or, purchase it and start. But is there gonna be some? I'm sure there's some. Probably in every municipality that someone just purposely doesn't maybe try to call and he said, I don't really make any, so as I walk out, I'm just gonna drop my container.
So if somebody doesn't pay the bill, do you end up picking up their containers or how do-
Well, we stop service.
right?
Then again, sometimes they get creative and they put their container or their waste in some other services, because they just say, I'll toss it in there because you got room in there.
Well, there's a house on our block that's, I think is in foreclosure, but I know their water's been shut off. And I've heard, they're not paying their
I'm sure we stop service and then go to
service,
collection
and
service.
they're still living there. How, I don't have a clue, but.
Yeah. We stop service, which we're allowed to in our contract, and then we do offer up a collection agency to offer it. We don't have in our contract any kind of liens that may go through a property tax lien, which some franchise cities do offer that as a collection mechanism, because you all lose your 10% franchise fee on that too. So we want to make sure we get that, not only for us, but also for the franchise fee.
Yeah, but when you foreclose, the lien's useless, so.
I understood. I'm not saying we're gonna get every situation out, but it sometimes can be a little heavier handed because of the transaction, not necessarily being able to be processed with the county recorder because it's got a lien on the property. It doesn't always win.
The homeowner association's got a lien on the house, but.
Okay, sure. Oh, you'd be surprised how creative they get. They get creative. Not necessarily here, but all the places that I've been that were more populated and probably more challenging, they get creative. But we do try to tie into some kind of, like I said, most you bill your own water, so we do have mechanisms for that as an audit. Have we done it? We do it every year, probably every second or third year.
Right,
Thank
so
you.
yeah, that probably would be nice too.
Oh, sure, definitely.
Especially before, yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, appreciate it. All right, next item is Evers Park and improvement plans. That's Melissa. right?
It's done,
Yes.
it's done, right?
Well, we have the final plans, we have the final application for the permit. I believe on Monday, the 19th, we are going to meet with MIG and SLO County to sort of quickly review plans, make sure we're on the right track for the process of submittal. And then I'll be submitting the plans that week. So hopefully, the county will be quick and diligent and hyper focused on completion.
Which county is this? Is it-
Yeah. Yeah.
It's called Oz. I'm gonna take off. We're okay. Thanks, I appreciate it. Have a good holiday, everyone. Good to see you.
Have a good drive.
Oh, yeah, 10 each way. 10 each way.
Hi, hey, good luck, buddy.
Thank you, thank you.
So we are hoping to be submitting those plans in the next week and a half. So we're, Sort of
You
on the
might
up and up.
remember that the county rejected the plans originally because of ADA compliance issues, so.
right,
So are we, I mean, since January, I mean, we may not be able to start then summer of.
yeah, we'll put go to bid, you know, as quickly as possible once we have the. Completed, I guess, permits, once we have received the permits, right? And see where we're at. So we'll end up. Getting
Well-
creative with some of the timing of things, we'll need to, you know, I'm sure. But there's, you know, reason to be hopeful that we can get it done at least before the start of soccer next year, which is really important. Because the loss of soccer that's impossible to make up if we lose Evers entirely. We put 5 fields at Evers, so there's nowhere else that's big enough to manage that, so.
Yeah, so because once you get the permit, you have to start within 6 months. Right? Or is it a
You know,
10 years?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. I think the issue isn't so much that, it's how long is the county gonna take to permit it?
To actually
It's
approve the
good.
permits, yeah.
This county's known for just really horrendous,
They're gonna go come back 6 months.
so. If we are confident that the permit is going to be, that the plans are permittable, we can start the bidding process. What we didn't want to do is go out to bid and then have to make changes to the plans, so that those are change orders then.
Yeah.
For the contractor. We did develop with and provided to MIG, who, you know, assist us through this process, the specific windows of time when the park can be closed or the park can be accessed. And actually, it's a little longer. It's all, you know, about 4 months, because we can, the end of the rec softball season, we can stop organized activities at the park through the middle of August. So that's still the best case scenario at this point, is get a quick permit issuance or confidence that we can do that, out to bid, get bids, have bids awarded, and meet that schedule. Now, if any of those things go wrong, we probably lose 2023.
Any questions? Okay. All right, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for keeping at it. It's
Yeah.
not easy.
Right,
This
stay
is
on it.
the most frustrating part too, you know, the planning, sending it in, and it comes back again, you gotta revise it, and it's just like, you feel like you're just sitting on your hands.
just
but-
spinning the wheels,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, but yeah, hang in there. Thank you. All right, next item is out of district fees for youth center program.
We're gonna remove the word center. So we're talking more about
Yeah.
youth programs specifically. So currently, we have 2 sets of out-of-district fees. There's one for a kid who lives outside of our district, which is very narrow compared to the school district. But they live within the school district, they attend Templeton schools. Theoretically, they're within our sort of service area, right, for the rec department, obviously not service area for water, right, for the district specifically. But if they're Templeton schools, they're Templeton kids, right? And they would have a reasonable expectation of being provided a service through the rec department. And if they live outside of Templeton district boundaries and do not attend school in Templeton school district, it's another rate. So one is 15, the other rate is 25. I think you're both a part of that meeting. I think you've both been on this committee for quite a while. Put those together. And I think it was at a meeting at the Mid-State Solid Waste, interestingly.
Yes.
Yeah. Remember that. So we are seeing a serious influx of participants who are outside of both boundaries or both service areas. And I would very much like to increase those fees. You know, the $15 is fine for me as far as that goes, the charging a little extra for the kid who's outside of our service district, but inside of the school district. But I'd like to consider going up even as much as $40 for kids who, you know, they play here because we run a good program, or because they don't like Paso's program, or whatever the deal
Or
is.
Paso shut down their program.
Or Paso shut down, like, we had 900 kids this year, and I promise you, 25% of them were Paso kids, because they did not get their act together early enough. Have a new board of all volunteer program, all volunteer run program. So they didn't get the advertising out enough. The guy who's in charge of it, you can't teach him anything because he already knows everything. So they started registration around the time we ended, and it's usually the opposite for volunteer run programs. They've got certain registration dates they need to meet because they don't have an office, and we are usually the latest, taking registration the latest for most programs, because we're run through an office, because you can come in here, I don't need to set it all up as a bunch of volunteers on that one Saturday, right? So they didn't start until we were about finished. They had, in Paso specifically, they had, let me say 450 kids, and we have 900, and that is ridiculous. So I kind of want to de-incentivize the idea of Paso coming here to play just because we run a better program, right? Which we're always going to run a better program than them, as long as I'm here.
So do Templeton kids or the ones that go to school here, do they get any sort of priority at all? I mean, is it?
We took everybody,
We take everybody. Yeah.
I mean, I'm assuming we're getting close to capacity. At some point, you're not gonna be able to have more than 900 kids,
Fair, we do have the ability to expand in ways that some people don't, right? We're not only limited to our parks, we can use school facilities, we've got an agreement with them. We wouldn't take over the high school programs, the high school fields. Because the football, for both youth football and the high school football program, take up basically most of their fields, right? We could go to Vineyard on those upper fields, behind the school, and use some of those areas if we got a little bigger, and get a little more sort of creative with uses of space. But we're very much nearing capacity. Baseball this year, we don't run baseball, right? They have a limitation in how many teams they can take, so they did develop a priority list, right? Priority goes to kids who live in and go to school in Templeton as number one, and are signed up by this date, right? This all involves being signed up by whatever date it is. Priority level 2 is live outside of Templeton, but go to school in Templeton. The third one and the lowest one is you live somewhere else and you want to play here. So you live somewhere else, you go to school somewhere else, and you just want to come here, right? So this is a bit similar, right? But hitting them in the pocketbook, because in the end, baseball is not broke, rec department's broke, right? We want to capture costs that are not previously being captured, right? And then again, de-incentivize it, right? We could develop the same or a similar priority list when it comes to soccer specifically. I think that's where the need is, right? Basketball and softball and flag football, for that matter, don't have the same capacity concerns, right?
But there are impacts to our program, right? So if we have 900 kids, that means each one of Templeton's kids, that's who we're here to serve primarily. We maybe not all look at this the exact same way. That's who we're here to serve. Aren't getting don't get the same level of attention. Our fields are getting a bigger impact, albeit it's not double or something, because we are spreading out to other areas. We're playing on fields that we wouldn't have played on due to quality of maintenance or whatnot, had the issue not arose. And I think originally when this was talked about, it wasn't to discourage participation. It was to really kind of make up for the lack of tax dollars that a non-resident was contributing.
Absolutely.
So all of those come into play. There's more than one way you could do it through the priority list, but in some ways, and I guess my thinking is that's just more work to keep track of.
Is absolutely, especially in a busy season.
Yeah, you're dealing, all this, okay, who's priority, and then, and if we can just keep people from coming, we already charge more to begin with, or a little bit, and now, so if we can disincentivize, if you really want to come, you're gonna figure it out. So one, if playing sports in Templeton is the end all be all, they're gonna be here. They're gonna use somebody else's address. They're gonna work just like they do with the school district, right? This happens every day. So it can't be $1,000 extra, because they'll just work around it. So But keep the honest people honest and let them, maybe if we raise that price, maybe, instead of, 25, it's 40 or 25, it's 50 or something like that. We can temper down those needs. Most kids, but most parents want their kids to play where the kids go to school. Same kids, they want the kids to be around the same, so somewhere they're comfortable.
So how do you know, I mean, you just ask what their addresses are, or you're
It's required.
Bring a utility bill or something?
We don't currently require utility bills. People are amazingly honest when they're trying to lie to you. So, we know where everybody lives. We know where they have to write down their school name, the school they attend,
Yeah,
right? We know they don't go to Templeton schools, right? Templeton's still small enough, when I put a kid on a team, right, the kid's gonna, say where they live. But the parents typically will write their home address. When you're asked a question online and you're signing up for sports, right, you're gonna put your home address and not even think about it, right? That it's Paso versus Templeton, so. We could require utility bills, that's
well, I just,
It's a
yeah,
thing. It's a common requirement, right? But we haven't gotten into the,
I know you got
habit of having to track.
divorced parents over the kids live with their mother in Tascadero, but the dad lives in Templeton, so it's.
fair. I would imagine in general, those kids are most people are gonna put down the address for the home where the kid goes to school,
Yeah.
right? It's a pretty, standard thing. It's not uncommon for people to try to get around the system, right? So if they are going to Templeton schools, they're gonna put that Templeton address down on any registration, right? So.
I guess, why don't you just do away with all the rec programs in soccer and have year-round soccer?
Yeah, where the fields need a rest, the parks will never survive. So,
That's true.
I mean, as it is.
I mean, I'm only half kidding here.
Yeah, no, I know. It's been asked before.
This had nothing to do with anything, but you guys don't play in the rain, right?
Not typically. Not typically.
Cause
If
I
it's the
got,
last game of the season, we might have a rain game, but not a 2-inch mud bowl in mud hole.
I have a 10-year-old grandson that plays in the YSO down the road in Monday, and they won what, they playoffs.
Regionals,
And they had to go to Lompoc and play in the rain.
yeah.
And the
Yeah.
parents were just up in arms about that.
Los Osos just had, so there's a couple of parts to that. First of all, we live in California. It doesn't rain here. We're not used to it. We melt, right?
It's true.
A lot of soccer moms melt when rain is touching them for other reasons, but when you look at coastal areas, right, typically, and it's the reason a lot of golf courses are put on the coast, right, money, but the base of their soil is sand, right?
Yeah.
And sand drains really nicely. So Los Osos just had a tournament this weekend. It rained, 3 inches over the weekend, right? And their fields look just fine because it all just drains right through the grass and into the sand, right?
Didn't
and
happen
through the
that way
sand.
at Ascot.
So do you look at the mud bowl they had on state champions, it's amazing, right?
Yeah.
Soccer's not.
That field is going to have a lot to come back from. Whoever's on their irrigation and field crew is gonna have a lot of work to do. Because their soil is a little more calcareous, right? It's got a little more rock, right? You look at Evers and Bethel to a degree, but Evers primarily, you get about a foot down and 9 times out of 10, you can't drive a stake through it because you're hitting a rock, right?
This is planted at my house. Yeah, I know that.
Same idea, right? I mean, you look at when you go by all the big farms that are redoing for, they're tilling soil, for new planting, right? There's huge chunks of rocks in there. So the closer you get to the coast, right, the more sandy soil, the easier it is to drain, the more likely those fields will hold up, right? When you come over here, once they're destroyed, they're destroyed. And then we have some ongoing maintenance issues that have been a thing for us that we need to get a few things done that haven't been happening in the last couple of years, just to help with some of that drainage and compaction stuff that we're seeing, so.
Okay, sorry about that.
So what's your thoughts on the out of district fee proposal? This would apply to all sports, even though soccer is the one that's most impacted, right?
Yeah,
And you
Alright, yeah.
recommended 40?
I was thinking 40, it's a nice even number, right? So, yeah, from 25 to 40.
I got the 50, but that's.
Absolutely.
I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
whatever.
would still like to keep the outside of our district, but within school district boundaries, the 15,
Yes.
right? That's a bit
Yes,
stable, still captures some of those costs that aren't captured through property taxes, right? But, yeah, 40 or 50 even, I think would be,
Sense, I mean, I
choice,
think they're
yeah.
putting a lot of, it's thin as, it's stretching out our resources and they're
Yeah.
not, paying. We have community that, with volunteers as well as they're donating their, money and they,
Absolutely.
we put, our community puts a lot into the Parks and Rec and then you have others that come from outside and enjoy that benefit, that it's not, we wanna try to make it as equitable as possible.
$50, you can cut your salary.
$50, coaches don't have to pay the out of district. Cause they're volunteering.
Yeah, okay, fine.
I mean, that's a
Your-
significant
Your
amount of time,
expertise,
so-
so I'll go with whatever you.
I won't tell them that. I'll
whatever
tell them
you-
that after they sign up to coach. We want the right coaches.
So,
Okay,
yeah,
so
yeah,
50, okay.
just to discourage, let's make sure that if they need to come here, there's really some boundaries. Not.
Yeah.
And, I think I don't think this will end up getting much pushback and just say, look, we're trying to.
can go
do-
somewhere else.
They have-
There are no out of district fees for other programs. They're all volunteer run programs.
I see,
right?
that's
So
right.
it doesn't
Well,
matter. to them.
No, there are, some programs are very strict, like Little League, for example. There are 0 out of district participation. You may not, if you
There's
must participate
boundaries,
where you
yeah.
live, and that's it. There are no other choices.
Yeah, you get penalized if you got an.
You cannot have.
I think Atascadero is the only Little League program left in the county. Or excuse me, in North County, I should say, because Templeton runs through Cal Ripken and then Paso runs through Pony, which I think might be loosely affiliated. So kids can choose, kids outside of Atascadero, right, can choose which program they want to participate in, which because if there's no other program to choose, they don't have to adhere to those
Templeton
boundaries.
still counts.
Right.
I
Yeah.
remember the fiasco when they changed.
Oh,
Oh, that was terrible.
I'm still a little scarred from that. I don't even run that program.
Yeah,
Those guys were awful.
they were, yeah.
Yeah.
And I am surprised you still have Cal Ripken, right?
Yeah. Well, all those guys, interestingly, the people who pushed hardest for that and were the biggest proponents and were accosting children on the field about where do you live? Do you even live here to play here, right? None of their kids continued in baseball
Yeah.
because they made the experience so volatile,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So,
It was terrible.
because it had nothing to do with little kids. That had nothing to do with little kids playing sports and that's frustrating, so, but whatever. Yeah, so, okay, 15 and 50,
All right,
done.
good,
Comfortable.
all right.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Everything good? All right, last item, Parks and Recreation update.
Okay, we're gonna be getting green waste recycling things for concerts this year. Very exciting. Maybe
Very
next year.
exciting, all right.
People are gonna go, I'm not
hopeful-
bringing my grass here.
Hopefully Mid-State will promote them. So we are out we're accepting applications for bands that are interested in participating in concerts in the park. That's gonna go through the 20th, and I'm about to send you, Ms. Carrie, a press release to hopefully get sent out to the group, to the peoples about that. We've got a few applications already in, which is really exciting. We've got a list that people kind of ask year round, so we just add the bands to this list and send it out as soon as things are open for them to participate or to apply. Soccer, we had 7 teams for All-Stars this year. I mean, 900 kids, you'd expect we'd have quite a few teams. So we have 7 teams. First tournament was in Los Osos this weekend and all of them placed first, second, or third. We had 2 firsts, 3 seconds, and 2 thirds or somewhere around there. So wow, everybody placed. The boys U14 team, in fact, has won that tournament every year since all of those kids were in U10. Wow, so it's pretty exciting. Dynasty, building a dynasty. Basketball, we have about 380 kids on 45 teams. Games start January 7. Practices are ongoing. You've probably seen them around town outside during daylight hours and sometimes in the backyard during non-daylight hours because we're the only lit court. So that's exciting. We're training a bunch of referees this weekend. Should be great.
So the basketball, they're gonna be playing outside then.
Yes, no, practices for basketball have always been outdoors. longer than I've been here, since I was a child, right? We don't have a gym. We don't have any access to gyms during basketball season because there's, I don't know, 6 or 7 teams run out of the high school that take priority for the high school gym, and at least 2, 4 teams, sometimes 5, running out of the middle school gym. So all of the practice space during after school hours is taken up by their school teams, right? So we have always practiced outdoors. Games will be inside on Saturdays. Games will be in the gym. So we're going back to the model we did have a basketball season in 2020 because it ended in the first weekend of March. So we're going back to the, 2020 and earlier model.
So who plays at ABC Church then?
Some of the coaches, our coaches will reserve indoor practice space.
Oh, so.
So they'll reserve it at ABC. Some of them are maybe church attendees.
Oh.
They know a guy. Some of them go to Kennedy, right? So the rules for that is it has to be okay for the whole team. Some families have a hard time traveling outside of Templeton for a certain practice time. They cannot require the participants to pay for that rental,
I see,
right?
yeah.
So if the coach has, enough money to rent it themselves, we don't stop them. But it has to be acceptable with.
So that's just. for
And we do have
practice.
some kids, some parents who have requested that their practice happens in Templeton, right? So don't put me on a team that's even remotely talking about going anywhere else, right? And that's just for, their own preferences or their own lack of ability to travel, just not that far, but it is if you gotta get off work early to do it, so. Yeah. Softball and t-ball registration started today, very exciting. So that's happening. We've started some youth art classes in the community, in the rec center with the loss of the library association. So we've got, they're currently operating as rentals. We've had, I think 5 or 6 since early November, maybe late October. We've got another one this week. They'll be doing some decorating of ornaments or something. So that's really exciting. We painted the room when the library moved out, and we're doing the floors and getting things kind of into like some deep cleaning while we have the ability to do it, right? And some maintenance stuff. We've got youth art classes. We're looking at doing some more community classes. We used to have a Zumba class, for example, so maybe bringing back some adult exercise classes, some other activities. And one of our preschool teachers is potentially interested in having private after school program. Although we're meeting next week to discuss what she would like that to look like. So how that would operate, whether it would be a rental, whether it's a drop-in like homework club or, an actual pickup. I think it'll be closer to like middle school age kids and like a safe place for them to exist outside of their home.
And are we planning on putting curtains up at the community center?
I think we are. I think it was in the budget
Yeah,
for
we
this
budgeted.
round.
Budgeted for what?
Curtains.
Curtains, yeah, blinds.
Curtain blinds for the community center.
So it's gonna get done. Oh, is
Needs
it?
to.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it takes a long time. Like these were like 6 months or something
These took,
to get
yeah.
to order and
months.
get delivered.
They were a custom order, so the blinds that they were probably just be some more standard that would be in the past.
So yeah, at Lions, we're trying to have our secret handshakes and meetings, and it's hard to do that.
You do? I don't feel like you're on a pedestal and being watched. It's like everything is happening. It's kind of weird. It's true. It's true. And I did see that secret handshake. So honorary member. So I feel like that's quite
Well,
a,
we've had to bust the blind budget to buy a vacuum.
Oh, that's right.
I want to be in charge of vacuum purchases from here on out.
Oh, it was that bad, huh?
Yes.
The belt was missing.
I hope you included a extension cord for the vacuum.
Do you need an extension cord for the vacuum?
We did,
Oh, at the community center? I've got about 30 extension. cords.
because it wouldn't go all the way back to the corner,
Interesting.
yeah.
Okay.
And I was told more than once by certain, I won't mention certain people's names, but they couldn't vacuum back there because the vacuum wouldn't reach.
Naveed, you could have just called me.
That one wasn't.
I can easily put an extension.
So I had to bring one,
Where
the
the
only
back-
thing, the reason I know that, is I might have me bring one from home so that I could do it.
Okay. I'm making a note.
But yeah, I see.
Anything for you, Wayne?
No, it's from Marcia, I'll tell her.
You tell, well. I
You
wouldn't
laughed at her.
I see, I like her.
Okay. Yeah, most people do.
I'll put one over there today. Unless someone's in there, but
Kyle Johnson, we have a new parks maintenance worker.
yeah,
Started, go yesterday.
Okay, nice.
Is that right? Yeah.
yeah,
Kyle
yeah.
Johnson.
The baby Johnson, that's what we're calling him.
Oh.
Yeah.
I told him he seemed okay, so. Yeah, he's already, I think he's settling in pretty well with the crew. Because he's primarily with the utility crew, right, and seems to get along with them well. I called him this morning to ask what he thought about parks being open for practice, and, we decided they should be closed, and I went and walked him and thought he was absolutely accurate, so I'm excited for that. Been keeping an eye on him, he's been doing some graffiti and sticker removal over at the skate park and stuff, so he's getting it done. So I think now that the leaves are starting to dry up a little bit, he'll start getting some of the leaves taken care of outside too. It's harder to move them when they're wet, sticking to the ground. It's almost a
He
futile
handled our
effort.
Christmas pretty well. So.
He did, he did, he was there all of like 4 days and went to the Christmas party, so. and Poor thing sat by himself with his girlfriend or whatever, so. Obviously.
Well, that's
sat with
true.
them
That's,
really
I
well.
really feel bad about that. I also feel bad about Lou was over
I
there
know.
by herself and I went and apologized to her.
I sat at her table for a while too.
Well, I was over there.
I
for a
thought
while.
about forcing them to mingle, but then I was like, new guy, new board member.
Yeah, we removed tables and chairs to keep that from happening, but then we ended up with some no-shows. and
Yeah.
So we,
After the count off.
Don't blame me.
no shows, people who no-showed that we didn't even.
That didn't know about, yeah, we thought they were attending,
Okay.
but I I mingled with them a while, tried to get him to get up, move his chair. He did okay. He did okay. He seems like a friendly guy, so I'm not too worried about that. So, and as far as Kalud goes, I think she was, also fine eating at McPhee's. On our dime, I think it was okay. She was- yeah, she seemed great, so.
Awesome. All right, well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. That's the end of the meeting. Meeting adjourned.
Okay.
Well,